Hi, my name is Janet Molbeck. I'm the executive director of Interweave. We're a small nonprofit here in New Jersey working to support spirituality for daily living, an integrated spirituality that nurtures wellness, the common good, and your spiritual life. Each year, we have a telethon. It's a way of keeping that work going. If you didn't have a chance to tune in, we hope you'll take advantage of this second opportunity. We want to thank you for supporting our work with 12 wonderful conversations about nurturing hope through prayer and practice, art and action. Thank you in advance for being there for Interweave and for the spiritual life in raising up the importance of hope. What we say here at Interweave is, let hope live in you. Thank you. Happy holiday. And welcome everyone. We are at the turn of the hour and we are continuing our 12 conversations on this day of nurturing hope for our fourth virtual telethon in support of Interweave. And in this hour, in the 9 a.m. hour, we have the lovely, a good friend and colleague of mine, good friend of mine, and a good friend of Interweave's, the wonderful and amazing Carrie Cabush. So just to say a little bit about Carrie. Carrie is a I'm gonna do this, Carrie. Let's see if that works a little better. Here we go. We're getting there. We're getting there. We're getting there. Um, Good morning, Carrie. Carrie is just to give you a little biographical fingerprint of Carrie. You can't capture Carrie with a little biography, but she is an Episcopal priest. She is the priest in charge at St. John's Montclair.
Yes,
Right?
it just changed, so you got
It
it.
just changed, and I had said to Carrie, it's so interesting that she's turning over with the new season, liturgical season. She's beginning this new position, and we're so glad that she is still in the area because Carrie has served on the board of Interweave. She has been a facilitator. She has been for many years a presenter, bringing us wonderful programs at Interweave. And Carrie is also a clinical therapist, correct? And
Correct.
um, somehow there's an alchemy in that because she's able to bring this gift of spirituality and this gift for promoting wellness uh, into to a beautiful gift that she to continue we've just been talking about food and serving and hospitality into a way of serving the people of God that is quite extraordinary. Welcome, Carrie. Thank you for being with us so early in the morning. We are here in this hour, and our conversation is about nurturing hope through the practice of self-care.
Yes.
And so we're asking you, we know you have so many components to you, but we are asking for your therapeutic hat this morning. And we're living through such extraordinary and sometimes stressful times. We feel very lucky to have you here to help us to enter into a conversation. How the heck do we take care of ourselves in in what can feel like a storm many days. So, how are you carried this morning? And thank you for being with us. And I'm just going to jump right in and say, um, what is on your mind, and how are you approaching this challenge as someone who tries to guide people on this path?
It's funny, tries to guide people and also tries to guide myself. That's how I'm coming this morning.
Caretaker, take care, I believe is the
Yeah. Well, and it's I slept through my first alarm this morning. Whoops. But it was a good practice of, okay, I have
but
less time than I planned. So what are my priorities? And one of them was coffee. So that and it wasn't, nothing was rushed, but it was a good reminder. I spent a year working as a dialectical behavioral therapy therapist, and it's a very specific approach. And one of the mottos is doing the best you can with what you have. And I just think that is so grace-filled and so true of all of us. Whether it's day to day or year to year, we don't always have the same amount of ourselves to give or to tap into. And so, how can we best use what we have in any given moment and do our best to put the next foot forward? Now, oh, you're muted, Janet.
I love that, doing the best with what you have. Because it's funny, we were just talking about food and yet this is a time that can feel like it's a time of scarcity. I don't think we feel it's interesting. In a world, we're living in a country of abundance in many ways, but there feels like there's a scarcity on um this thing of hope and an idea of how to care for ourselves in a way, in a world where we seem to have so much. Why are we ailing?
I think it's I think it's somewhat a false sense of because we have access to so much, we should be able to choose the right thing all of the time and make it happen. It's the sense of if we have access to it, it should be possible. And I also think it's living in the time we live in. It's a constant news cycle. You can't turn it off. Even if you try, the person next door on your walk will bring it up. And these I was saying to someone recently, I'm tired of living in unprecedented times. I wonder what precedented times feels like. I'm not
I
sure.
I agree. I totally agree. I don't want to live in unprecedented times. That I'm so with you about that. Um, that's part of the problem. And when you were saying that, I was thinking, well, yes, it's like, we used to have seven channels, and we had 700 channels. Now we have like 200, 5,000 channels available, and you can't figure out what to watch.
Yeah.
Or eh, it's like focus is a challenge.
And it's hard to know what to focus on. Um, I was at a conversation this week and people were talking about the drones that are flying over parts of New Jersey. And I actually had managed to not hear about it. And then all of a sudden I heard about it everywhere. And it just was this constant, should I be more worried about this than I am? So we don't even necessarily know where to put our focus, let alone how to narrow it in. And I think we really have to be careful not to normalize this. This is our modern reality, but most of human history has not functioned this way. It's not the way our brains are really wired to succeed and to flourish. And so tapping back into the core of our humanity, I think is really at the core of all that we're talking about today to not only generate but sustain hope too.
Yeah, I mean, we are there's an epidemic, according to the Surgeon General, of loneliness. And so once again, all of with so much. And is that why? Is it because we are somehow cut off from ourselves?
I think it is a big piece of it. We talk about this illusion of control and choice. There's also this illusion of connection. We're more connected than we have ever been before, but we're also more lonely than we've ever been before. And I remember working as a therapist during the early parts of the pandemic, I was so exhausted. And my supervisor said to me, well, of course, you're doing therapy by Zoom. And so your brain sees the person on the screen, it's trying to pick up on their energy and their body language, but you only get this much of their face and their shoulders, and you can't transmit someone's energy through a screen. And so you're constantly seeking for that same connection you would get in person. And it's just not quite as possible through Zoom. I loved what Sean said. There's such a blessing to being able to connect virtually, but it's not quite the same. And I think we've we need to supplement with that humanness as much as possible.
Just to keep going with the virtual thing, because it did feel like, oh, this is great. I can be here. I mean, this is as close to my location as I'm going to get, right? I
Yeah.
can, but it's almost the challenge of, I guess it comes down to my understanding of spiritual practice is that the very essence is to be here now. And
Mhm.
I'm not being here now because I'm 17 places, and I'm thinking, well, I don't even um factor in travel time anymore. So when I go actually someplace in person, I think I can just like beam there. And so there's no time. Like time, there's an absence of real time somehow with the virtual. I know, like you say, in some ways a gift, but we haven't. There was an unintended consequence that occurred that I guess we haven't made the adjustment.
Well, and we started at the top of the hour with the scarcity mindset. I think we also have a scarcity sense of time. Although technically our days are just as long as they've always been, although in the winter they feel much shorter when it gets dark at 4:30. But I feel the same way. I somehow feel like because I can instantly connect, I should be able to accomplish more in a day and be able to be someplace faster than I'm able to be. And it has us kind of living in this world we don't actually inhabit. And I think it's this baseline level of stress that it has existed from the mass communal trauma we experienced in the pandemic and never quite resolved because I think we there was a little bit of a reset during the pandemic of we're home, we have time with family we didn't have before, we have to slow down a bit. And I think as things reopened, we went right back to our old patterns, if not amplified them because we missed them so much. And so um, one of the things I love to say is that spirituality and faith and religion have always known what psychology researches to prove to be true, which is that at the core of our being, we have to get back to what it is to be human, to feed ourselves, to sleep, to rest. It is not only a biological need, it's a commandment from God in many faiths to rest, to regenerate, to allow ourselves to be still in this very frenetic time that we live in.
I love that. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, eh, whenever I fly, I often think, were we built to fly? When I arrive suddenly in another time zone, um, we have all these, I'm going to call them almost superpowers, and yet we have to come home to ourselves and kind of the simplicity of who we are, um, outs outside of the technology, what in whatever ways the technology is taking us away from that. And I mean, here we are using technology, obviously, to in this in counterintuitive what to what I'm saying, not to draw us away, but to bring us towards. But um, we it can derail us sometimes.
Yes.
And I don't want to stay too long on the obstacles. I don't want to catastrophize. Um, but I do have a feeling, I've said this to you many times that sometimes I get up in the morning and I turn on the news, and the thing I'm thinking is, let me turn on the news to see what terrible thing has happened today. And the amount of stress that like I get the feeling that I'm not the only one that is wakes up to the day not with good morning, God, not with thank you, creation, not but let me see what terrible thing is about to. And so so how, so we're living in tough times. There's no doubt about it. Um, However you're experiencing the um the changes of the day, the realities of the day, the news feed of the day, where whatever your political affiliation is, that's uh, an aside
Yeah.
to the central issue, which is this supposed to be like this? Is this the way it's supposed to feel? Because, and I'm not under any illusions that I've lived a long time. I've been around on the planet many decades. So there's no illusion that there was some time, any time that was without its challenges, without conflict, without things that needed to be faced. But it does feel like this is, as you said, what did you call it? That you didn't want to live anymore in.
Oh, unprecedented times.
Yeah, we don't want to live on unprecedented, but it seems we are. So let's start. So that knowing that that is, you know, the surround.
Mhm.
How do we? How? Let's start with you. How would you? What's your philosophy? What's your way of and because I often find that what you do is probably, I mean, you're the professional. What you do is probably the best thing. So if we learn from what you do, then we'll know what to do.
There is that danger of the, do those who can't do teach. I wouldn't claim I can't do, but it's hard. And so I always try to share from a space of humility to say that the things that I share that work for me, I often forget to use or don't use perfectly. But I think it really is tapping back into being human and through using the senses. So when we talk about worry and anxiety, which I think is underlying much of what we're discussing, living in unprecedented times, the constant news cycle, um, it, those are emotions and states that are not rooted in the here and now. They are worry about what will happen. They are worry about what we've lost. And so, one of the best ways that we know how to return to the present moment is through the five senses. So, sight, sound, touch, taste, smell, because it reminds us of where we are in the moment. Um, and it's tricky living in this time because I can see you on Zoom, but I know you're not physically here present with me. And so sometimes our senses can get a little bit confused. But if we use our senses, it taps back into the humanness of who we are and whose we are. And it actually helps to calm the nervous system. And I think So many of the world's faiths have a practice of praying a certain number of times a day. I remember when like Fitbits first came out and it was so exciting that at the 50-minute mark, if you hadn't stood up or stepped, it would remind you. We know that this is hard, that it's hard to live in our bodies, to care for ourselves. And so using the senses and figuring out how we can do it regularly, whether that's setting a timer or one of the things I'd love to talk with you about, Janet, is a practice that I've helped many people set up and try to set up for myself. One in my home, one in my office, is kind of like a self-care box. There's probably a better name for it. But the truth of the matter is when you're stressed, when you're worried, I should say when I'm stressed, when I'm worried, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm not fully myself. And so pulling at strategies and tips feels out of reach. So having something prepared, ready to go that helps me tap into my senses is really, really helpful. So, a basket or a list on the phone of things that help me get back to the present moment to be mindful. So, for example, one thing that you can see, I keep on my phone. Sounds strange to use technology for self-care, but use what you have. I have a folder of favorite photos that includes pictures of my nieces and nephews, and they're being goofy and sweet. And that is something that seeing it brings a smile, not only to my face, but to my heart. And it is a way to return back to the moment and say, I have family that I love and they are sweet and kind and funny and goofy. And that is really important too, not just all the stresses of the world. So what is one thing that you can think of that when you see it, it helps you pause for a moment, you know? What do you think? What's something that when you see it, it helps you pause?
Well, we just had this conversation about hospitality, and we were talking about the relationship between nature and our previous guest, Alec and Sean, were sharing, and we have a there's a window that when I get up in the morning, I see this tree outside the window, and what is amazing about it is I see the seasons changing in the tree. So the tree is always there, but the tree is changing. It has leaves, it doesn't have leaves, um, it has snow, it's wet. Um, I feel like I've befriended this tree, or has this tree befriended me, right? And it's a grounding spot for me. And I try to remember when I go down the stairs because I'm looking at the tree. It's almost like a focal point. In meditation they'll tell you to have a focal point. Um, in Back in the day, in if you were doing trying to do have a natural childbirth, they would tell you have a focal point,
Yep.
return to your focal point so that you could and they use that in also pain management, right?
Mhm.
Have a return to so I stop on the steps and the tree's sort of like a focal point for me. I look at the tree and I breathe and I don't there's a grounding thing that happens that almost is inexplicable in that moment, but I have to remember to actually stop on the step and do it.
Well, not only to remember to do it, but my guess is the first couple weeks that you lived in that house, maybe that tree, the site of it wasn't necessarily a grounding thing. But the more that you've lived there and seen it and contemplated all the seasons that it's been through, the more it becomes meaningful to you. And so the first time out um may not feel like a raging success. But the more you use it, the more helpful and calming it becomes, which I love. now I'm thinking I just moved into a new house, so I'm looking all around to see if there's a tree I can admire, and there's plenty. Although they're all a little sad and losing their leaves at the moment. Oh, you're muted again.
It's the guest that's supposed to tell the moderator is supposed to tell. Thank you. Um, when you were talking about it's strange that you could use your box at it could be in technology or your Fitbit. Um, but again, this analogy with the food conversation, there's food that's good for us, and there's some good that maybe isn't so good for us. Um, there maybe it's the ways in which we use tech that how we have to manage how
Yeah.
we the same way I have a relationship with the tree, I have to have what is my relationship, which may be a strange thing to say. What's my relationship to technology?
Well, but
Because,
really,
right? What do you think?
yeah, I think absolutely. And I didn't mean to cut you off. I got excited.
It was a new thought.
There's a beautiful prayer practice that I found I do when I teach confirmation classes. One of my favorite ones to teach is I put out a bunch of different types of prayer, a rosary, a labyrinth, and one of them is a phone-based prayer, and the teenagers love it. Because it's a different way of using your phone and kind of training your brain to see it differently. And there's 5 steps, and I'm not going to remember all of them. But one of them is to open your text messages and look at the last 5 people that you've texted and to pray for them, each one by name and what you know is happening in their life. And there's one, speaking of the news, where you open a news app, or if you're one of those really amazing people who don't keep a news app on your phone, you open the news online and you pray for the first 5 headlines that you see. And it's a beautiful way to remind ourselves that when we see something stressful, something that causes anxiety in us, it's an opportunity to reach out for help, to God or a divine figure, to somebody else, um, to that we don't have to be stuck in it. We don't have to be alone in it. And there's more practices in there. Like I said, there's 5. Those are the 2 I'm remembering at the moment. But to see that box as a prompt for prayer. There are prayer apps. There was a time I set reminders to pause. That speaking of the Fitbit, you can set alarms to pause and meditate. You can use technology to remind you to care for yourself. It doesn't just have to be this big distraction.
It's amazing that this question of like, what's our relationship to technology because and to the times and to I'm a big Emerson and Thoreau person, and Thoreau's response in his time, again, we're not the first time, is to leave. To
Mhm.
leave. I'm going to Walden's Pond. I'm gonna isolate completely. Um, we're in this time of the wilderness theme with for if you're in the Christian tradition for kind of a wilderness theme for Advent. And, the monks left. They just went to the desert. Um, but there are other ways. So maybe some of us will be called to leave because somebody like Thoreau is a sign, right? But we're not all John the Baptist. Some of us may be called to realign our relationship to these things that are affecting us so that we because cor- I think there's a sense of a loss of control. So when I hear you saying use the technology, like set a timer to stop, or even calling back to um the hours of prayer, and this is multicultural. I mean, we were Muslim tradition, the 5 times call to prayer. If you're praying in the office, how many, to let the hours, to set your clock to pray. Um, I love what you're saying about the news, which can be so oppressive, turning that into prayer, turning that into prayer. That's amazing advice, amazing wisdom. And the different, the thing about, I was saying that you have this alchemy is actually, one of the things I admire about you, and one of the reasons I uh, listen to your wisdom is because I know you're walking the talk, and that this is your walk too, and that you're often sharing out of your own. It ain't easy to walk this walk journey. Um, so
Well, and I think I'm honored and I do try. It also means I fail a lot, but I try. And I think, we're today is a day to talk about hope, and there's a risk that hope will sound Pollyanna, like denial, like everything's fine. But I really think hope has a lot of grit. One of my favorite, I have some mixed feelings about St. Augustine, but one of my favorite, he's a complicated fellow, aren't we all?
complicated guy, we
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. But he has this quote that I can't even tell you where I came across it or what of his books it's in. But it comes up for me in different seasons, and I'm not going to remember it perfectly, but it's about hope having two daughters, anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to believe they don't have to stay the way that they are. And I love that because it places hope in the realness of what it is to be human, which is to be frustrated and to trust that there might be something different, that God can bring
I
about
actually
something
want you
different.
to say that again because it
Yeah.
was so important.
So Augustine talks about hope having two daughters, anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to believe that they don't have to stay the way they are. It's not a direct quote, but something like that. And it's something that I hold on to because I I think we need to remember that hope has that grit. Um, Hope is belief in something that you can't necessarily see. And it requires that we feel, that we don't become numb to the kind of chaos that we live in. And it also requires that we be brave, that we don't just resign ourselves to the now. Um, and I think to do that, it's all about letting ourselves be human again, slowing down.
And when this I'm almost seeing like two daughters,
Yeah.
anger and courage. Um, they might live in the same room.
Mhm.
They might, share a bedroom somewhere. It's not like one cancels out the other. I always love when you hear people talk about, the hero. Carrie knows I'm a big hero's journey person.
Me too.
Um, and as we something another thing we share, um, it's not that the hero is not afraid. It's that the hero goes anyway.
Mhm.
Um, Something moves her or him or they forward. Um, and I think it's that thing of hope. I think it is that thing of hope that something else is still possible. Something else might happen. Something else is waiting. This, wherever we are, is not the end. It's a place. It's a it's a place in the road.
Well, and I think too, from what I remember of the hero's journey, which, I've talked about it enough, I haven't revisited it in its original form in a long time. There's a mentor, a wise person, like somebody who comes. I don't know if it's a guarantee in every hero's journey, but I would argue,
Absolutely.
say,
There's always help. There's always help. I always tell people, go to the Wizard of Oz.
yeah,
If you want to know the hero's journey, go to the weird. Help comes.
outcome.
Sometimes, and hey, Wicket's very big right now, so help comes.
Outcomes. And that's the piece, it's funny, there's this pushback to the idea of spirituality in the world of religion because it's sometimes used as a rejection of organized religion. I think you have to have both because no, whether you call yourself spiritual or religious, if you're doing it all on your own, it's going to feel very isolating. And I think that's what I love about Interweave is the opportunity to bring where I am on my faith journey right alongside where other people are in theirs, and we learn from each other. We are on the same path. We might be going slightly different and at different points in it, but that is a big piece, I think, of generating and cultivating hope is to learn from each other and to offer support for each other and to share wisdom from where you've been on your faith journey. I think that's a big piece of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need companionship. We need one another. We
Yeah.
Yeah. You need mentors. You do
Mm.
you do need wise people along the way. And they don't always look, I don't think, like you'd expect them.
Right.
There's sometimes like, oh, and that's the nice thing about the Wicked story is, oh, we could be friends. We could be roommates.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
want to
and
spoiler alert, but I think everybody knows the Wizard of Oz story.
but I think too it's there are research studies that suggest I think it's five. I might have the number wrong, but the five people you spend the most time with, you tend to take on traits that are similar to them. And just an important thing to think about. It's not a checklist to decide who you're going to spend time with, but when you spend time with people who intentionally rest, who are mindful, who ask big questions, who encourage your faith journey, it encourages you to do the same. So that cultivating of your inner circle is, I think, a big piece of this too. How do we set ourselves up so that we are encouraged on this journey um, to learn from each other and to support each other?
That's amazing because I really do see the correlation to what you were saying about the technology. Like, how do we, what do we consume? What do we consume? What do we choose? What do we draw close to us? Um, is going to nurture hope in us. Is going to nurture our spiritual life. Is going to nurture our potential to become the people we want to be. Um, that's lovely. I want to give space because I want to ask you, what are some tactics or tools? I didn't used to like this word. People say, what are your spiritual tools? But I know you have a spiritual toolbox. And um what's something you would think that you would a tactics, if you will, that would help us as we realign ourselves, as we steady ourselves for this time that we're in, so that we can be well and we can be hopeful. What
No,
was what
I
wisdom do you have for us, Miss Carrie, from your magic toolbox?
well, I actually love the toolbox or tool belt analogy because that's what part of the lesson I'm trying to remain holding onto from pandemic is that you need a variety of tools. If you can't worship in person, what can you, you know, we the more tools we have at our disposal, the more flexibility we have. And so, one was that kind of spiritual or self-care box that we were talking about. So, I remember I didn't finish it, which is perfectly okay. We got caught up in the moment, which is how it should be.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness, we did not finish it.
it's
Please.
okay. But it's having either a list that you keep or literally a box or a bag with something that appeals to each of the five senses. So something you can see. I talked about a picture on my phone, something you can hear. It might be a song or a bell or opening your window to hear the birds and the leaves and the trees, something you can taste. It might be a mint or it might be chocolate. That's my favorite. Uh, something that helps you just really tap in, something that you can touch. And actually, so touch and smell. I know, Janet, we were chatting yesterday and you were telling me about something that just came into your life that taps into both of those at once, which makes it even stronger. Do you mind sharing a little moment of what that is?
Isn't this incredible that in this moment I'm like, really? Yeah, that was so powerful that I can't remember.
I'll give
Refresh.
you a visual cue.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Someone really wonderful gave me some lotion, hand lotion, and I thought, oh my goodness, that's two of the sentence because um, there's touch,
Oh,
but it had this beautiful scent to it that I was extraordinary, and I felt so invigorated by it. Good,
yeah.
good visual cue.
Thank you. So and I used to carry they've turned now, so I need to replace them. I used to carry essential oils in my purse for that very purpose when I was feeling overwhelmed and needed a break. Smell in particular is such a fast track in the brain to emotion, to memory, to calm. Um, and so anything that you can have that is touching base with the five senses at your disposal and giving yourself a little bit of time to engage with those things and ground yourself. The other one is one that I learned as a therapist going session to session. My supervisor told me something called doorknob mindfulness, which is sometimes that's all the only moment you have between clients coming in and out is when you open the door to let out the last person and to enter in the new person. And so if you can find something in your day to start associating with a grounding practice. So still to this day, I do my best when I open a doorknob for me, I say a little prayer. It might be leaving behind what just happened. It might be preparing myself for what comes forward, but I try to take that moment because it's a guarantee in my day I'm going to touch a doorknob a couple of times to just pause. You might take a breath. You might say something that you are grateful for. But I'm a big believer in setting yourself up for success. So finding things that are easy to get to in your home or your office that deal with the five senses so you can ground yourself and finding something in your day that you are is pretty much a guarantee is going to happen and trying to pair that with a moment of pause. Because otherwise it's so easy to just kind of steamroll through the day and your stress response is on high alert all day long. And so returning back to what it is to be human, I think is a big piece of this. Oh, you're muted again.
So interesting. We're talking about the hands, and when you say that you touch the doorknob, and that's like I'm thinking again back to the focal point, a reminder
Yeah.
to stop and pause. And then if you're in your hands, you actually tell us to use that we can use our fingers as a reminder of the senses through which these
Yep.
we can open up to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the fingers are also I feel like I'm doing rapid fire tips. Oh,
Oh,
I like the thumbs up. But again, use what you have. I love what we call finger breathing or starfish breathing. You breathe in as you trace up a finger. and breathe out as you trace down a finger. And by the time you're done with your hand, you're usually pretty relaxed. In, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. And that's 5 breaths that you've
Favorite.
slowed down, you
So
know?
we're breathing in through our taking in through our senses. I'm trying to just through our taste, through what we
Mhm.
see in nature, eyes. What's your
Hearing.
taste one?
Chocolate is my taste one, for better or for worse.
I know I'm chocolate too. What would the fifth one be? Or though a s'more
Ooh,
would be really good.
be really good.
I really feel God's love in a s'more for sure.
Well, because there's always more. S'more, there's
Oh,
always more,
what's
you
the
know.
fifth one? I'm missing a sense.
Hearing.
Hearing.
Yeah.
So funny.
But
That's
it is I'm laughing, I'm forgetting all my tricks as we're talking. But it that was we did a vacation Bible school training for some of our camp counselors and we talked about how to de-escalate, how to calm somebody else or yourself. And I said, just stick your hand out. I said 5 senses and then breathe. Like those are that
simple, simple,
simple.
simple, simple.
And
And
it
what's interesting is we started to laugh. Like we did this, and I was like, I started to relax and
yeah.
enjoy this moment with you, being with you, my friend, sharing things that are life-giving. Isn't that just as important as the news cycle? And that when I love that you told us that we can turn the news cycle into a prayer time.
Yeah.
Wow. So before you go, I want to ask you, this is see, this is why I mute my phone, because I have this fear of the phone ringing. Um, what in the middle of all of this, what makes you hopeful? Where do you see hope, Carrie?
It's a really good question. I'm grateful to have a lot of sources of hope, especially right now, starting a new job and meeting lots of new people. Um, but I think actually what you just shared, that, we kind of started the conversation feeling, at least talking about the problems in the world makes me feel a little weighed down. It's hard to talk about them without feeling it. Um, and as we talked and processed together and did the breathing and talked about the things in the senses that bring us joy and hope, our demeanor changed. Mine did. I felt more hopeful and I felt more myself, more relaxed. And it is a reminder that we can change things in the very small ways and in the big ways. And I'm aware that sometimes talking about the 5 senses and breathing sounds kind of like, oh yeah, like that's going to fix things. But the thing is, it taps us back into who we are. It helps us get creative again. And I think that can make all the difference. And so, um, we're seeing reports that conflict is on the rise and that people are more irritable than they've been and people are lonely. And this conversation is proof and reminder to me that all of those things are not stagnant. They don't have to remain that way. There are ways to tap into it that are just part of who we are. It's not some fancy technological invention. It's all possible in tapping back to who and whose we are. Oh, you did
I
one more.
love that you're reminding me as you say that that we can be the news. We,
Hey, I
you
like
know,
that.
a sighting of hope over New Jersey in a conversation between Carrie and Janet on Interweave Learning's webinar today. Um, that's a news feed that we can
Yeah.
create ourselves, and you definitely brought us hope this morning. Thank you so much for being here, and you're extraordinary. We're very blessed to have you as friend this morning. Um,
I
thank you.
feel very blessed. Thank you. And thank you for creating a day to generate and cultivate and share hope. That is, we need that. We need more of it. And so thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Thank you.